Welcome to the Power of Design podcast. My name is Jack Osa. I'm an architect, born and raised in Colombia, South America. Years ago, I migrated to the United States to follow my dreams, and today I'm the founder and principal of Osa Studio, a multidisciplinary architectural design firm in Charlotte, North Carolina. In this podcast, we talk about design, business, creativity, and the inspiration we need to create an exciting and powerful built environment. In today's episode of The Power of Design, I'm talking to Alex Gore. Alex and his partner Lance are the owners of F9 Productions and the host of Inside the Firm podcast, a podcast that is on my favorites list because they discuss the day-to-day operations of their architecture firm. During this conversation, we talked to Alex about his involvement not only in architecture, but also in construction and development projects. And we talk about the current challenges and lessons learned when architects decide to raise the bar to have a bigger impact in the built environment. This is my conversation with Alex. Hey Alex, welcome to the Power of Design podcast. How are you today?
I'm doing great. It's good to see you again.
Yeah, man, thanks. It's cool to do a podcast swap. And I was glad, I was interviewed on your podcast about a week ago. And I'm glad to have you here. I've always been a big fan of your show.
Yeah, absolutely. It was good to know more about you, and I'm sure our listeners will like it. So hopefully it will be good to know something about me too. We'll see.
Sure. Yeah. So, just to give you a little bit of background, the Power of Design grew up out of the idea of who are the people in charge of creating the built environment, which in my mind is three buckets: the design, construction, and real estate industry, because we need each other to make things happen in the built environment. Design takes over and then leaves it at some point for the construction team to build it, and then real estate takes charge of money, lending, project management, brokers. There are all these communities that come together to create these spaces. And the premise of the podcast is, how do we have deeper conversations about what we're doing and learn about each other that are typically not had in the project setting, because this is usually very project related. So
Yep.
Tell me about yourself. I know you guys have your farm with your partner Lance, and I've been following your podcast. I've seen you guys do a lot of other things. There is a lot of good energy. You guys are for sure entrepreneurs. But tell me about yourself. How did you get to where you are today? Where did you grow up?
Yep. Happy to. If you would let me, I'd love to go on a tiny tangent because
Sure.
I want to make sure I don't forget. I think a lot of people, when they start with architecture, they think that architecture and design leads. You said you want to get to kind of a deeper understanding of this. And that makes a lot of sense because, an owner comes, talks to you, you get to design it, work with the zoning rules and make something happen. But I think the deeper I get in this industry, the more I realize, because I've wore multiple hats, it actually goes in reverse. And I'll tell you why it goes in reverse. It goes real estate leads, then construction, then design. And obviously government and zoning has its whole overview over all of that. And I'll just skip that for a while. But why real estate leads is because to get financing, you need comps. And you need comps on something similar. So if you do something unique, it's hard to get comps for it. And if it's hard to get comps for, it's hard to get money for it.
Sure.
So that's the first limiting factor. That's like a silent limiter that a lot of people don't realize. Then second is construction, right? You have to be competitive, you have to use the products that are out there. And a lot of the products come from the influence of what products exist come from the contractor that's ordering them.
Sure.
So even though we pick them, that doesn't mean that there's not a lot of architecture where it's just a general spec of, hey, fiber cement siding, or, who knows, in every different aspect, it's really the contractor. So they are leading kind of what's available to us.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that you can't design and lead something, spark something, but there's these hidden factors that influence more than what we know. And the more you get involved in those other two, I think the more you can start to see holistic
Sure.
solutions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no,
Okay.
I'm glad you said that, and we're just gonna keep going because you started. So, when
Yeah.
you look
Good.
at, I've been thinking about that a lot because sometimes I think sometimes we give too much credit to the design in the way that impacts the user of the space. So the design just goes so far. And I think when you talk about all those aspects that impact the built environment, that makes me question what is the role of the architect that is unique to the architect's position. And to me is the ability to understand the use of a space by other people and how do you create the best experience for them. And then that experience is shaped by the physical environment. Then you go to another plane of development, which is the materials, the accessibility, the constructability, all the technicality. But the very core and essence of the architecture is the understanding of the use of space and the experience of other people of that space, and how do we make that experience not only functional but also beautiful. And I think that's one of the things where you start realizing, there are many different types of architects. There are many different portions of the profession, and that's why I love it so much, because there is a place for everyone. You can focus on the technicality, you can focus on regulations, you can focus on artistic expression. There is always a place for you. But the real mastering of the architecture is when you start understanding of all those layers. And I agree with you that it goes backwards, because the best designs are the ones that you create based on an understanding of materials available, budget. You understand the constraints so much that you use them as their tool to create that experience for the uses of the space.
Yeah. And I think where I'd take that, because one key thing you said is beautiful and functional. And I think that there are levels of understanding as you get more experience, and you should play your role in those levels. For example, any sport, this will relate back to architecture. Let's say you are a first year quarterback, right? You got to win the job. Once you win the job, you got to play the game. It's football, it's fast, and you just got to survive and hopefully win some games, right? 10 years down the road, when you are someone like Peyton Manning, right, or Aaron Rodgers or anyone like that, you can still start telling the coaches what to do. You can start saying, hey, I want this guy to come. You now have command over all that.
Yeah.
As a freshman, you're not doing that. As a rookie,
right?
You're just trying to live. So the same thing in architecture too, is that know that there's different levels to this game. And then know that what you said too, there's different areas of interest. And once you kind of master some of the basics, or at least get good at some of the basics, I think you might have more impact going outside of just architecture and design. And and you could do different tracks. You could then start to, hey, I'm going to start getting my knowledge deep in construction so that I can influence the materials. Or I'm going to start thinking about real estate and development, because then I can talk with the customer on a different level or start developing my own projects. Or I can start advocating to the city for the zoning. There might be a great idea that you have that the city just decided to, for one example, there's a city out here, Firestone. They just put a moratorium on manufactured housing, which is trailer housing, because they had problems with that.
Yeah.
But here's the problem. Manufacturing housing is not just trailer housing, right? And I'm not convinced that you can't do trailer housing well, because I've seen examples of it done well. And there's different, it's a starter income house too. But so you can be an advocate and start to push and start to come from a place of knowledge and helping those city people rather than doing nothing.
Sure.
And I'm not saying that you have to do one or all of them, because you can pick.
Yeah.
Because I do hate when politics always say, hey, if you hate what we're doing, get involved. And
Yeah.
you're like, I'm trying to live my own life. That's why I voted for you to actually do something. Right. So I don't mean to come across like that,
Sure.
but only in the sense of like, in this, yeah, here's an example. Like, I only know so many things, and some of it is architecture and construction. So let's say I am going to get involved in politics, not running, but just talking in influence. Okay, I'll get involved in politics on the construction, architecture, planning side. I'm not going to give my, I'm not going to advocate my opinions about. You could name every other topic that's probably a hot button topic for someone else, and I have my own opinions for it. But like, am I really researching? Am I really in the know? Like, just take abortion or not abortion. I have my opinions, right? But how much am I advocating or knowing about it or knowing the different trimester? I don't know. I
Yeah.
don't know. So I'm not going to get heavily involved.
Sure.
But if your job is this and you've gone to that level, I think there's now that responsibility, because I'm telling you, city council and mayors, they literally like will make, there's so many decisions. They'll just make a decision. You know, like, I'll use that one. I'm going to vote for a moratorium on this type of housing, and be like, wait. You just stopped a whole bunch of different things that you have no idea what you just did. And I didn't even know this happened, but now that it's on my radar, I'm like, okay, maybe I should pay attention a little bit more.
Yeah.
Because imagine if you wanted to do some cool modular housing in a unique way that would meet the needs of the next generation. But I hate to say it, some boomer generation city council just outlawed it because they're, thinking narrowly.
Oh yeah.
That
Yeah. And
just
to
happened.
me, that's the lack of understanding of design, of what design is. People that are holding those positions, because they don't understand the impact of the decision. I run across zoning regulations where they basically draw the elevation for you, and these are the two materials you can use, and windows are these two types. Like, they design the building for you. There is no room for anything. You're like,
Yes.
it's like killing creativity immediately. But those rules are written by people who do not understand the design process. They don't understand design thinking. They don't understand the impact of space in human
Yep.
behavior. So yeah.
Here's an example which is kind of frustrating. There'll be lots in a neighborhood, right? And to go through the city process, you have to have example elevations of what you're going to build there, right?
Yep.
And what those should be interpreted as is like, oh, this is the level of quality that's a bare minimum that we're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't see it as that. They see it as, this is the only style.
Right.
So now you're stuck with typical suburbia, which everyone's seen, and it's in every city, right? My house that I live in could probably be in a neighborhood in suburbia where you live.
Sure.
Right? No different. But so example, like, let's say I bought a lot or you bought a lot in one of these neighborhoods that had leftover lots, but you're like, I want to do something cool and modern, and it's going to be the same quality or better. They won't allow it. And I know for a fact, because I know that there are integrated neighborhoods, like, oh no, it'll still look cool. It will still look fine. Of course, some people won't like it, but whatever. It's not allowed because they took it the way, or they made it the wrong way. Like,
right.
Oh, you only have to do it like this, and that's it. And I'm not saying it's going to be easy to fix or pleasurable at all, but you could be great at design and an architect and be given that project and given that lot. And now where's your design going? Nowhere.
Well, I think that's where, as I said at the beginning, the role of the architect is to develop spaces and experiences for humans, and within the constraints we have. So if I have only certain materials available that my client can afford, I should be able to create excellence with those constraints.
Sure.
Same with if I have local regulations, those are my constraints now. So how do I use those limitations to create a beautiful and a special experience and functional experience for my client with the limitations? because I think that's where the key is, because otherwise we always gonna have a reason why we're not realizing the best potential of this thing.
Yes, I agree. And I guess for some reason I'm just on a rant. Um,
What happened
only
today,
be
Alex? Tell me the truth.
you want to know? Okay, I'll tell you what happened today. So there's this major project,
Yeah.
right? Big project. It has a church, it has a commercial center, it has a residential center.
Yeah.
And the city voted 3-3 tie whether to approve it or not. And there was two reasons why. And Lance and I are going to kind of go into the background on our Friday episode, but traffic and then aesthetics, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I was talking, I was like, the best way a developer should prep the city council is you need to have a meeting with them beforehand.
Sure.
And then you need to somehow lay out in not accusatory way what's happening with those major issues, because they always come up on big developments. Those two always come up. There's more, but those two always come up. And I think you say something like, hey, there's going to be a public hearing. That's fine. Just want to let you know I've been through this, a whole bunch as you have. And normally they complain about traffic. And what a lot of times the public doesn't know. And I say public doesn't know, but really I'm telling them what you don't know, city council person. What you don't know is a long time ago, the city planning staff got together with traffic engineers and planning officials and decided the zoning of these different areas. And based off of the zoning of these different areas, they have different capacities for loads for vehicles, meaning residential versus commercial versus industrial. They then design the roads, and there's different levels of roads to function to meet those zoning areas. So if a client buys a piece of property with the zoning and uses that with the intent of the zoning, it is designed to handle that traffic.
Yeah.
So what a lot of the public doesn't know is all they see is an increase of traffic. Oh, did you guys think about this? This seems just like it's coming out of nowhere. Yeah, to you, it seems like it's coming out of nowhere. But not only was this planned and addressed by the architects and the civil engineers, even before we bought it, it was thought about 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's not coming out of the blue, and then the second thing is aesthetics. And I won't go deep into that, but aesthetics should be judged on quality, not style, because everyone's going to have a different style. So it's what's the quality, what's the refinement, what's the care, not what's the style. Because if we go into style, I mean, the Sydney Opera House was booed, the Eiffel Tower was booed, but if you talk about quality and refinement, when you look at those two, you'd be like, well, it does have quality materials and it does have a sophisticated level of refinement. Okay, it checks those two boxes. I don't like the style. Maybe I don't know anything about style.
Yeah.
Okay, it's good.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that's what happened.
Yeah.
And the last rant. Sorry, this is a rant.
Keep going, man.
the last rant is a lot of people, even if they're good at something, they think that they're good at that other things. And that goes back to like my other political issues. Man, you have to acknowledge that whatever your idea about that, there's someone that knows a whole bunch more.
Yeah.
And that's not your hill to die on. But it doesn't mean to say, like, Jack, you could have one of those other political issues that for some other reason you look into a lot. So I'm not regulating you just to architecture design, but just know that your stupid opinion about something else doesn't matter as much as something that you know a lot about.
Right.
So yeah, take responsibility for that.
Yeah. No, that's amazing that, through architecture, you get to experience all those levels of thinking and, association and communication, and you get to, at some point take a stand and take a position, and you can even have the potential to affect that through the practice of architecture.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Exactly.
Awesome.
Yeah, keep going.
Okay, yeah.
Sorry.
No, tell me about your farm. I wanted to learn about your story, but give me a quick summary of your your career and as an architect. I'm very impressed when you have in your history that you spent some time working with Daniel Libeskin, and I was like, oh my god. I used to have the Crockies magazine about his buildings, and so that's pretty cool. I love to know about that part of your life.
Yeah. Um, that's hilarious. Just because my mom, before when I was in high school, I was always into architecture since elementary school. I was always drawing and drawing buildings and things like that. In middle school, I was drawing floor plans. And my mom had this Time magazine of like the greatest architects, and she goes, "Oh, this Daniel Liebson looks cool. Why don't you work for him in the future?" And I remember saying, "Nah, like I don't want to work for him." Blah blah blah. Anyways, lo and behold, I go to school, go to NDSU. Did you have I think every college has the Alpha Chi Rho medal. The faculty vote on the student that best emphasizes excellence. All that.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, won that. And then applied to Liebskin and a bunch of different firms. Got 3 offers and then chose Liebskin. And then my mom brought it up because she remembered that like 8 years prior.
Wow.
Said, "Remember what I told you?"
Yeah.
I was like, "Oh, okay, you're right." And that was an amazing experience. It happened that my timing was slightly off because it was 2008 when
Wow.
I graduated.
Yeah.
So I graduated in the summer, went out there, worked for 3 months as an intern, and then got hired based off of that internship.
Right. So did you go to Germany or was it here?
No, New York.
New York. Yeah.
Yep. New York City. And then whenever the crash was it September, October, something like that? Whenever, 2000, the financial
Yeah.
meltdown.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd get off at the Wall Street station, and it was Regent Street was right next to it. Anyways, we were on the 17th floor, and remember the bankers getting laid off,
Yeah.
walking out with their boxes. So on the 17th floor, there was the perch.
Wow.
So out the window, we'd sit and look. And then I remember seeing them and going like, I wonder if that's going to be me pretty soon. And then it was like 3 months later or something like that, because it took a while to, trickle down. But the construction industry got crushed. Architecture got crushed.
Yeah. I was there.
I think, yeah, there was maybe 60 people. And I think the first layoff, 11 people got laid off. And then I saw some people, obviously, like I just got hired. So I was one of the last hires. So people more experienced than me, even better and smarter than me, got laid off. So I was like, I'm not going to take this harshly whatsoever.
Yeah, it's coming.
And everyone was getting laid off everywhere. And I had, have friends at SOM, you have friends at all the shops, all the big guys are there, right? And architecture is kind of a small world. So it's, you have Columbia University.
Mm-hmm.
So, one guy goes to work at Liebskin, and then all of his friends work in other places, and then you're all kind of friends, you know? And they're like, oh yeah, everyone's getting laid off. This is terrible. So I was like, well, I don't know when this is going to end. I go get my construction management degree. And then during that, my business partner now, Lance, he gets laid off here. He worked for a firm where the 2 principals got Young Architect of the Year for the AIA. So he worked for a great firm. The studio, HT, no one knows their name, but just great guys. And then when we graduated in 2008, we said, hey, in 10 years, get some experience. And then in 10 years, 2018, we'll start our firm together. Well, now it's like 2009, and we're like, well, we're out of school.
Yeah, we might as well.
No one is hiring whatsoever. Let's try to get work. He started getting some work. I finished up my thesis, made the website, started doing some work with him, came down here to Colorado, started getting work. And then it just took off from there. I don't think it was a fast trajectory, because from 2009 to now, which is 10, 11 years, we have about 15 people.
Okay.
So it's about 1 to 2 hires a year.
Sure.
steady growing. And the thing, talking about, your podcast, design, construction, real estate, we did systematically try to add those to our portfolios, right? So Lance had construction background. I was in the Army National Guard and construction company, so I did construction stuff too. Then during 2012, maybe the tiny house movement was big, so we designed a really cool modern tiny house that had all glass on one side, had a deck that folded down, an awning that folded up. Built that. Then a Fortune 500 company had us build two more that were huge, that had like a sky deck on it, all this intricate stuff. And then from that money, and then we were all doing architecture all along, regular architecture. Then we bought a piece of land, and then we designed townhomes and our office. And we knew how to do that because that was the majority of our architecture work. So we were doing construction administration on that. Did that. And then from there, we thought, we always thought, oh, just keep getting bigger, right? After you do that, now do a 16-plex or a 30-plex or something like that.
Yeah.
Well, we learned a lesson, and that lesson was, as most architects know, there's the development process of getting through the city, right? All the drawings that you need, and then all of construction. And if you're doing spec builds, you are risking that money the whole time.
Sure.
So we're putting all that money on the line for 3 years later, right? And then, okay, now you get a multiple because you sell multiple of them, right? The last two are when you make a profit, but it's a huge risk for a reward. And we kind of did the backwards math, and we thought, okay, we have all this experience. Why not, instead of risking that money over 3 years, we have architecture clients. And during DD phase, if they're within, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, if they seem like a great client, offer our construction services. So now, and then the client's already secured. There's no risk.
Right.
Your longevity of that project just goes from 6 months to design to now 6 months plus 12 to build it.
Sure.
And then your risk also goes down because you probably have a client that's, you and them are not on the same communication wave, or you just don't dive with, you just don't offer the services,
Sure.
Less risk there. And that's kind of where we are today. It's like, build 4 or 5 houses and get the same return as doing an 8-plex, but really reduce the risk.
Sure.
Yeah.
And it makes a lot of sense because still your architecture practice is keeping up with the cash flow. So if you have anything that is a longer payback, it's coming, but you don't need it for the day-to-day operations. That's a really good just business sense. It makes more sense to have different sources of incomes and diversification, and it also practicing architecture. You elect where you want to have more control over your design to make that happen.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
The Power of Design podcast is brought to you by OSA Studio, a multidisciplinary design firm focused on creating impactful experiences through the power of design. We partner with our clients to create buildings, interior spaces, brands, and strategies that help you deliver a successful project. As a minority-owned firm, we are committed to building a diverse platform of curious and driven design professionals so we can together pursue our full potential. For more information, please visit us at www.osastudio.com.
So tell me a little bit about how you guys work. I know you guys talk a lot about Revit. You guys have developed some Revit tools. I've been using Revit for about 12 years and I love it. I work on it every day. Tell me about, how you guys leverage technology for your practice.
Yeah. So the main thing that we learned when you talked about, it relates back to, the power of design. And the power of design is not only how you influence how people live, but how you can solve multiple problems with one solution. And we use Revit to integrate not just design, but construction also. So I'm sure you have wall systems, floor systems in Revit. We separate them so that they mimic construction, and that's our working process. So our first schematic design layout is with walls that are just framing walls with gypsum on the inside, right? Once we get, and same thing with floors, they're just literally the structural floors. And then once we get into design development and we start putting, sorry, I gotta turn that off. Then we skin it, with our finish wall. Then we skin the floor with our finished floor. The ceiling too is the same way. You have your ceiling cords, which are either TJIs or the bottom joists of a truss, right? And then you have your gypsum later, because the gypsum doesn't go all the way across. It stops there. And everything we do, and then we decided to, okay, we got to hone our template not only that way, but let's do it with the views too. So we have 3D views set up, but now we have 3D views with only the structure showing, because we're modeling the structure, right?
Yep.
We have material takeoffs already taken, ready to go. And how it works with solving multiple problems with one kind of solution is, now when people are drafting, all these terminologies of, stud wall, this layer, that layer, quantities, how the structure is laying out, they're seeing while they make it. So then when we want them to get downloaded faster in that construction sequence. Now when they're getting calls back, or we can have the contractor call them earlier than before, because they've already built it. They've literally, as much as possible, already built it. It was just in the computer. So when a contractor says, "Oh, this can't work," or "Where is this?" It probably can.
Sure.
Probably can. They either just can't find the information, or maybe we need to cut another section, or something like that. And that's our operating, so F9 morphed into 9 fundamentals, right? Fundamental principles that we base our business off. And one is quickening the feedback loop, right? So we want to increase the feedback loop so that literally we can beat the competition, right?
Yep.
Or we can provide better service,
Sure,
or create more value.
Yeah.
Yep.
And and Revit, and in general, building information modeling is one of the best feedback loops you can have. I had a lot of projects where I make sure that my consultants are working in BIM as well. And that moment when you can have a structural engineer model, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, you integrate it, during the design process, you do your clash detection. The coordination is way ahead that it would have been just in 2D drawing. And then even more than that, and what's been interesting is that what I've seen, the adoption of BIM in the general contractor side has been a lot bigger than in the architecture side, because the contractors, they really see the benefit you're talking about. They understand that is the tool to really mimic the real world. So I work with contractors where they ask for the design models and they give it to their subcontractors, and they take it one more step in detail. So I've seen things like, modeling sprinkler heads, modeling miscellaneous steel connections. And that's the point where, you have virtual design meetings, you get all these problems solved in advance, and they see the benefit, because, more than in architecture, time is a lot of money in construction. So they realize that there's a lot of time they can save in places where, if you were to get to solve a problem that it was built wrong, it's very expensive.
Yeah. And I also think that you as an owner can save time by laying down a philosophy of how you're modeling and training. So for example, Nick, he does a segment on our podcast. He's an architect in Florida. He's had some staff, and then he was hiring a new person, and he's like, I don't necessarily have time to train them, because some firms, it's just like, okay, you're in school, Revit, just jump into it. All right, but they're going to have different ways. And then if someone has to pass that model to someone else and they have to clean it up, you can see where this is cascading to.
Yeah.
So we have everything I said is a course online that we sell.
Mm-hmm.
And he I think we just gave it to him because he does this work, for us. And then he decided to watch it too. And then he goes, I think I've been using Revit wrong for 12 years.
Oh yeah, I believe that.
And I go, probably not wrong, just different. It's like
Yeah,
a slight twist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always tell people that, there's a, can you do this with Revit? And like, you can do anything you want. And there are many different ways to get there. So
Yes.
there's a lot of trial and error to understand, oh man, I used to model these things this way and I realized I should have been modeling these ways. Or I used to group these elements and I shouldn't be grouping. Or,
Right.
how you build your families, how you do it. It's a fine tuning. I've been using Revit for 12 years and the more I use it, I'm like, oh my God, I didn't know this. And I change my workflow all the time. And it's all towards efficiency and making a model that is comprehensive, getting the right information at the right time.
Yep.
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 Tell me a little bit about your guys' experience podcasting. I think your podcast was one of the ones I used to listen that inspired me to start my own podcast. How did you guys come up with that idea, and what is how the experience been like?
Yeah. We started with a terrible podcast called Driving to Work. So Lance and I, we teach one class at the University of Colorado Boulder, and we thought that we had interesting conversations, so we recorded it. And I mean, there was some car background noise, and it got some listens. I think we averaged like 600 an episode, which is not too much,
Yeah,
but
it's not bad.
not bad, especially for just talking about anything, like random subjects. And then we decided to stop that because it was kind of random, and we go, okay, should we continue this? And it was harder and harder for us to like actually meet and sit down and talk about business. And we go, well, why not every Friday, we meet and talk about business, because we have to anyways, because we're business owners and we have to be on the same page, but let's just record it and put it out there and then call it Inside the Firm, because that's just, you're now inside the firm.
Right.
And then the opportunity came was, hey, we're going to develop this development that we're in, that we built our headquarters and those 8 things. It might be interesting for people to see how that goes, and what lessons we learned and stuff like that. So that's the majority of the thing that we can talk about. It kind of followed that, but the permitting process takes so long. So it wasn't like back, oh, this is just about that. But one of our top episodes was when a plumbing fixture broke and flooded one of the units right before.
I mean,
it was it was devastating to us. But it was just like, man, this can happen. There's so many things where like the younger people in my firm, the only reason that they're nervous or hesitant about is just because they didn't go through that experience. And you don't have to go through all of them to learn, because I learned a lot from mentors and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I can just do a quick, confident answer just because, oh, Jerry told me.
Yeah.
He's a 60-year-old architect. He knows what he's talking about. He told me this, so I'll tell you that, right? And that's where I think some of the value comes from, is like, not just that episode, but different episodes. Like, oh yeah, those guys did that, or those guys screwed this up.
Yeah,
that's normal.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I've been doing podcasting for about 2 years, and if nothing, just the experience of having to have interesting conversations with people like you. I'm learning so much. We met online. We probably never met in person, or maybe one day, but I'm already learning so much from the experience, and it just makes you a better person. It takes you to a different level, learning, curating the information, talking to people you are aligned with. So it's definitely a win-win situation, at least for me.
Yep.
Yeah. Awesome. I'd like to know about yourself, Alex. How do you, to do all those things that you do? I'm sure there's going to be a good deal of discipline and an organization in your life, in your mind, your mindset, how you run your family, your business. Tell me a little bit about you. How do you run your life?
Yeah. So one of the big lessons that I learned about this build was it got extremely stressful towards the end. And so stressful that it was overwhelming, meaning like it was impossible to meet deadlines and meet budgets and all that. And it finally came down to, I don't do this now, but it was at least a month and a half. Like, oh, I'm going to get up at 4, get to the job site at between 4:30 and 5, and I'm going to work till 7, and that's all, that's all I can do. All I can do is from 4:30 to 7. I have a family and kids, and I bet you my brain wouldn't work much after that. And I'm going to try to diligently get things done and accomplished. And that's when it's weird. That's all I try to do. I don't wake up that early and I don't stay that late, but I'm by nature an impatient person. And that allows me to get things done, but there's a double-edged sword to that. My note-taking is shitty. Sometimes I don't listen enough and don't put in what you're saying because I'm impatient and just want to push things out or get things done. So it's a double-edged sword in that I think it helps me accomplish things, but it's not a perfect fit. It's not perfect for everything.
Yeah.
So going back to that feedback loop, I would say the main thing that helps me be as productive, I'm probably not as productive as people think I am, but is how do I shorten that feedback loop? Right.
Yeah.
And here's one of the big ones. Actually, it's not a big one, but like it just if you add up shortening 100 feedback loops to a 3/4 of the time, half the time, a quarter of the time, 100 of those, you can really compress a lot.
Yeah.
So one of someone working at the firm was working with one of the clients, and they were texting back and forth, and they were long texts, and they started to get a blame game, not from our side, but from their side. And I just said, hey, stop. Right now, it was Friday. I go, there's probably not enough like brain energy to get this done. I said, what you need to do Monday morning is call her and talk to her, because you're going to get it a lot better.
Yeah.
And Monday came, and then and I go, okay, are you going to do that today? He's like, yeah, I was thinking about writing that. I go, nope, it's a phone call. It's a phone call. Get the information there. It's either going to go good or bad. And a in-phone person is going to be even better. Obviously, a meeting would be even better, but we need to condense that, right? I'll get a question about, whatever. And if I don't know the answer, I'll call a manufacturer reps. I'll call the engineer. I'll call a builder. Hey, let me call Brian, the builder, right now.
Yeah.
And figure it out, I don't know if I answered the question, but
yeah, no, I did. And I think one of the, the other answer that you gave with your answers was that I think you have a good deal of self-awareness, because you understand, what your strengths are, but you also understand what your weaknesses are. And just being aware of that is half of the battle, because now you're clear enough to understand where or when you need help and where you can get that help from.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I guess, with your partner, you have a lot of opportunities to, develop a partnership where you guys balance each other on what those things are. I have my firm. I'm the only owner of the firm, and sometimes, I would like to have somebody to talk to about something, and I don't have one. And I talk to friends and sometimes with my wife, about the issues, but it's not the same because they're not in it with you. So,
right.
So the conversation is not the same. So just being a sole owner, it's very lonely, because you don't have that counterpart to bounce ideas with.
Yeah. And two, I think that's especially hard in that position, because you could have groups, that you mastermind groups or something like that. And I think that helps go a long way. But there's also the difference between it's Monday and it's 10 a.m. and there's a question that you don't know, and you could turn around and talk to your business partner or something like that, but it's not enough to call up that group or to call up someone else that's busy.
Yeah.
So the feedback loop is a little bit longer.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And that's why it's
Yeah. Yeah. So tell me about the vision you guys have for your farm. How do you see F9 in the next, 10, 15 years?
Yep. We had a retreat recently where we brought everyone up to the mountains. And we asked people for their visions, because my vision is to enable their visions. And we got some things that we didn't even know about. So, but it's kind of obvious in hindsight, but I think I was maybe stuck in the day to day, meaning, how do I provide enough clients so that everyone has enough work, so that everyone has a paycheck, and then also get enough good work so that people will be satisfied aesthetically, spiritually, stuff like that. And that's just where my head was. Like, as I'm managing all these balls and pay, like that's as far as I could see.
Yeah.
Like, let's just keep this running. And they mentioned some things like some bigger projects that they wanted to do, some taller buildings or some master plans or some unique sustainable ideas. And Lance and I just took like, hey, that's great. Let's now work on acquiring these. We did not know that was the goal. We did not know that you wanted to design these types of things. And what it helped there was this one kind of sustainable living community. Anyways, I saw something on Arc Daily, and I brought up this image, and it was just one guy was kind of left in the firm. I go, isn't this awesome? And I go, wouldn't it be great if these things were arranged in this way and it was a whole kind of development? And he's like, that's what I was talking about at the retreat.
Yeah.
So then my brain goes like, okay, I know developers. I know like land cost and zoning. How do I put my skills and effort towards helping making this happen?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And that's where we are there. So there's two levels. There is that level of how do we help the people that are now 3 years in work towards their goals and what they want to achieve. That's on top of the base layer of, like I said, maintain clients, maintain cash flow, all that. Secondary to that, on this cake layer of a firm, is building up the construction side, because it's just a different level of responsibility and reward that I think is healthy for an architecture firm. And then the third layer are their dreams, their projects. And I'm not giving priority to the top two, other than the first one I have to, or else the other two don't exist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exciting. What would you say is the future of the design and construction industry, if we can think far down the line?
I am semi-scared for it in one regard. I think it might become more compliance with bureaucracy. And I think that's semi-soul crushing. And I think that maybe me and maybe others might have to have a better outlook at it. And I kind of do. It's helping people create their dreams. And part of that is going through this, I'm sure everyone has experienced it, like, oh, the city just won't allow you to do that. Why? Because they made up rules 10 years ago, and those are the rules. Like, oh, you can only make this sort of thing, right? Yeah. And I just don't see the cities giving up the rules that they made. I only see them adding. And it's because because this is the nature of how it works, is a planning department or city department has some rules, and all of a sudden on one project, they tapped into the sewer wrong and connected it wrong, and it was this whole big thing, and it didn't work out on that one project. And it could have just been because the contractor put it in the wrong place. Could have been just because they didn't think about it. Puts an alarm bell in the city and the planning, like, we need to make a rule that we need to check this plumbing condition on every single drawing.
Yeah.
Oh, why do you need to do that? So we can eliminate that error. Okay, that one's justified. They do that 100 times. Now is every one of those justified and every project bogged down because of that? So I think we might morph into being people who respond to bureaucracy. And I feel like I need to say that because a lot of times I feel like that question is more an aspirational. What can architecture be?
Yeah.
What can we do? And I don't think that we can live up to that aspirational thing unless we address reality or no reality.
Sure.
And if we can't do something to curb that, that's not saying there's not going to be cool, awesome, amazing architecture. But what percentage of your life, and I didn't say time, I said your life, is going to be doing those? Is it only going to be 5%? Or do you want it to be 50%? I mean, there's going to be grunt work.
Sure.
That's okay.
Yeah.
It's going to be 5% or 50%. Okay. And so what do we need to do to make that 50%? We have to be aware of the threat. And the threat is that other stuff could eat up the other 90% of 5% of your time.
Sounds good, man.
It sounds terrible.
Well, that's an opportunity. I mean, the fact that there is that risk means that there is work to do.
Yes.
We can turn it around.
Yes.
That's just a description of the current reality, but there is a lot of opportunity for improvement, for understanding that people in charge of making decisions that impact a lot of people need to have an understanding of space design, community, society. Could be rethinking the ground rules, that they're going to be based on something different, not in, historic regulations.
And I think that that's the opportunity, because the framework is often the backdrop of whatever we make. So what if we do remake the framework? And what if it allows for more of what everyone expects that answer to be?
Yeah.
We're going to be making cool 3D houses. We're going to have new materials. We're going to have flying cars. Probably not, but whatever that is. Okay. What if we take our brains and work on the framework to let that happen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. Awesome. Well, Alex, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you stopping your work for a second on your busy life to talk to me today. I'm very excited and happy to have this time to learn from you. I admire what you guys are doing. I'm a fan of your work. And please, you guys keep doing what you're doing. You guys are doing a great job, and I look forward to stay connected.
Sounds great. Thanks for having me, Jack.
Thanks, man. Thank you for listening to the Power of Design podcast. Please remember to subscribe, rate, and review if you like this content, and find us online at thepowerofdesignpodcast.com. I invite you to join my mission to become a better version of yourself through the power of design.